Thank you, Isabel. Thank you all for coming. I'll do my best to make it worth your time. I think I'm just going to jump right into a poem and then back up to do some filling on what else is at stake here. The first poem I'm going to read is called Certificate of Origin. It's a meditation on my birth certificate. I found a brown copy of my birth certificate some years ago and began to try to make sense of the various information on it. The poem actually is in 2 columns. I can't read it in 2 columns for you, but it can be read straight down one side or down the other or across. I'm going to read it across tonight. Certificate of Origin. That beginning of which we speak, emergence into being seen and named, August 19th, 1940, 11:10 p.m., it says here on this brown document. The moment of separation after 6.5 hours of labor from the maternal body. Frances Elizabeth Coffey Morgan, white, housewife, age 25. Not the systole-diastole scatter return of pulsing anonymous cells mixing a human potion in utero from 2 batches of DNA. William Woodrow Morgan, white, service station manager, age 27. Still less the ancestral grit from upstream creeks, 4, then 8-fold, and so on back, swept down in diffuse narrative lines to that time and place, Crawford W. Long Hospital, Atlanta, where Dr. M.P. Pentecost and L. Thornton R.N. anesthetized the mother and hovered near until she had brought forth a son, whose eyes they treated with 1% silver nitrate solution, lest Frances be a carrier of gonorrhea and unwittingly blind her child. And not at all the ambient air and foundational earth, the intimate gravity of the local, the weight of the distant events bearing down, that hot Georgia red clay August night, the wooden blades of fans humming through the humid air, anesthesia and sightlessness soaking the half-lit room, having flooded already across Berlin, Paris, London, into Auschwitz, even into Mexico, where next day one Ramon Mercader, a Soviet agent, would take up an ice axe and calmly split open Leon Trotsky's head. Without self-pity, I hope I can think of myself as one born into troubled times, but I think all of us are born into troubled times, but this is my story, so I get to do that. Pause now to thank Steve and Isabel and the students at U-High and Tessie, who couldn't make it, poor thing, with her car broken down. It's been a joy to work with you people, and especially Steve. He has been such a pro. I've heard so many horror stories from poets about publishers who disregard this or that, or insensitive to this or that. Steve has just been sterling, right on top of it. So I really thank you. It's been a great experience. I found it difficult to make a book out of all the poems I've been writing for the last few years. For months, maybe almost for a year, I think Ellen will verify, where there were stacks of poems on the dining room table. We'd deal them out into stacks, move them into different orders. She'd come through and say, I don't like that order, and we'd talk about that. And finally, it is done, and I think it is a book, but it was not fun to make it into a book. It's a lot of fun to write poems, but it's not fun to try to make it into a book, for me anyway. Several years ago, I attended a reading by the former UK poet laureate, Andrew Motion. And I was reminded as I worked on my book of something he said at the time. He said, every poet I know sweats bullets over poem order, over trying to make a book out of individual poems. But I've yet to meet a reader who cares. So I invite you, if you can, to become the first, the one who notices the sweat on the page. I'll just say a word about the word salvage in the title. It's become almost a philosophy of life for me. It's both literal and a metaphor. I think at its simplest level, what it means is trying to find value in apparently unpromising circumstances. Find something that doesn't appear to have what you need in it, but see if you can make it work. It's not Pollyanna-ish, I hope. It's not saying everything is okay. It's saying there is value to be found sometimes in unpromising circumstances. I think that's probably enough. Let's get back to the poems. The book is divided into 3 sections. I think of them roughly by colors: gray, green, and golden. The gray have to do with the aging process and the losses and gains involved therein. The green is the natural world, of course, and the golden is the best of the salvage, the fine stuff you find, the treasure. But tonight I'm going to start with the green because it's spring and National Poetry Month. First poem I'm going to read from the main body of the book, that poem that I read to you before there, Certificate of Origin, that one's a prologue. This one is called Looking Down. It's a poem I wrote for part of the McLean County Barn Quilt program. And I can't hold it up for you to see, but it's a perfect square, so it looks almost like a barn quilt, like a quilt square. I was flying to O'Hare and looking out the window of the plane and thinking about my next flight once I got to O'Hare, which was to London. And it suddenly occurred to me that we live in a giant quilt. If you look out from above, if you can get high enough to look down on it, everything is in blocks, in squares, in 1 mile sections. So the poem is called Looking Down. From above, like this, square miles are real things. Scores of them, green tiles, pass under the belly of the plane as it makes its way up the length of Illinois. Each block is uniquely itself, but the materials repeat and repeat. Farmhouse, outbuildings, corn and beans, human work snugged up against a ditch, a river, a patch of woodland, and all contained by roads that mark a 1.5-century-old grid imposed upon the faceless prairie. That grid is the lattice within whose lines settlers and heirs have stitched the quilts of their lives. The next poem is called 6 Tree Sparrows. I have so many birds in my poem, I can't keep them out. They just fly right in. This one is an attempt to look past, you might say, the human signature on the land and look at the natural world on its own terms. I'm not sure we can ever do that, especially since the human signature is so strong and diffuse where we live. But anyway, 6 tree sparrows. Among the dozens of juncos, 6 tree sparrows low in the snow-crusted field make their way westward through mixed grasses, repeating a low, contented harvest song, calling discreetly to one another in calm, candid voices like so many small wooden flutes. In this late afternoon work, each bird settles about 2 feet up on a pale yellow foxtail seed spike, slim and tall, and rides it down, tail and wings buzzing in quick bursts for balance. Then slides along toward the brown tip, pins the cluster to the ice, and strips it, telling and retelling a narrative of progress to the others who listen, feed, and reply. This goes on stem after stem for half an hour. It is a labor elegant, precise, so perfectly fitted to itself that one watching could almost believe in a peaceable God. Then their little rusty caps, black breast spots, and white-barred wings rise and disappear into darkening trees beyond. This is a poem that, like so many of mine, originates in my bicycle rides on the trail. Is this about right? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, close to.
Okay, in the back of the room as well. Okay, good. I'm on the trail quite a lot. And this is a poem about a place where you might say the natural world of the sparrows intersects, unfortunately, with the human world, at least unfortunately for one animal. The poem is called Body and Breath. 6 warm days he held his rib cage taut, muscles firm and intact, face impassive, hair shining back at the morning sun. On the chilly 7th, his chest dropped, his fur bleached to gray, only the mask and ringed tail left to say raccoon. He exhaled a rank corruption that followed my bike for 50 yards along the growling road that broke him. I pedaled hard, contemplating his life, my kind, sucking in, pushing out the heavy, raw, saw-toothed air. In this poem, I'm going back to an ancient theme, poetic theme going all the way back to the Greeks, called transience. You've probably heard of it, the temporariness of things. The idea came to me when I was watching mayflies hatching at Moraine View State Park. And I remembered that mayflies are members of an order of creatures called ephemeroptera. In other words, ephemeral things, temporary things. So the poem is named Ephemeroptera. Creatures of this order, the filmy mayflies, break the membrane, shake off the water, and rise for their mating, an airborne quickie, then fall back to drop their eggs and die, all in less than a day. A dedicated life, focused, narrow even, it may seem to us who named them thus, as we, frail, fluttering, must seem to stabler things, say rocky shale, limestone, marble, granite, which themselves, in the eye of time, are brief as desire, and shapeless as the dust within them they are becoming. Another trail poem. Cycling the trail as much as I do, I've noticed the changing palette of colors in the trailside wildflowers. But I've also noticed that throughout that changing palette, all through the seasons from April to November, there's always something white in bloom. So the poem opens at the onset of autumn. It's called The Pale Persistence. Now is the yellow season, shading into orange-brown of goldenrod and sunflower, and after this, the white. April's snowy bloodroot, trillium spilled into the pink and blue of soapwort, vetch, and chicory, but summer long the ghostly sheen of cherry, locust, blackberry, the pale insistence sounding through the greening leaf and reddening fruit, a petal base of blossom white. Clouds of wild asters now, the time of bronzing corn and caterpillars liveried in black and rust. They bend and brush the earth and warn, after this, the white. Yes, after this, the white. Another local poem that actually came from the trail. This happened to be a few years back. I'm not a religious person, but I know a blessing when I see one. And this was a blessing. The poem is called Among Goldfinches. See these birds keep coming in? I am floating in a thin cloud of them, simultaneous with their soft whistles and rhythmic undulating flight, their tiny bodies suspended just next to my ears and shoulders as we inhabit each other's space and speed and direction for a dozen wing beats and easy pedal strokes, coasting on the morning wind. Then they bank off, settle, and sit like bright blossoms in scrubby trailside locusts, watching my ordinary bicycle plunge ahead into a canyon of Queen Anne's lace. Later, as I struggle home against the wind, their ghosts are glazing my arms like dew and wrapping the street full of traffic and starlings in a yellow nimbus, dropping an airy twitter and flutter of wings onto the rolling earth, then drifting off with a shy glance, feathered spirits teasing like a voice that whispers, some riders here still believe in angels. Almost missed one. The book actually opens with a section that I think of as the gray section, having to do with aging and the body. Each section has an epigraph. The epigraph to the one I'm about to move to now, the gray section, is, I saw a gray-haired man, a figure of hale age, sitting at a desk and writing. H.G. Wells. This poem is called Body Language. Some of you, regardless of your age, may recognize some of the situations described herein. Body language. My old knees are ravenous, so I feed them Tylenol. Pain is another hunger, the body clamoring for something to still it, to harmonize its processes with time within whose laws it lives, in chronic antagonism until the two have merged. For now, I stretch, massage, and medicate, and contemplate that other ache, desire.